Job chapter 30. Job chapter 30. If you'd like to turn over there in the Old Testaments tonight. I'm just going to talk for a little while tonight, which means I'll probably preach. But usually when I say I'm just going to talk for a little while, it turns into it anyway. Anyway, in Job chapter 30 and beginning of verse 20, I'd like to start beginning verse 20. Job is speaking here. He says, I cry out to you for help, but you do not answer. I stand up, and you turn your attention against me. You have become cruel to me. With the might of your hand, you persecute me. You lift me up the wind and cause me to ride, and you dissolve me in a storm. For I know that you will bring me to death and to the house of meeting for all living. Yet does not one in a heap of ruin stretch out his hand, or in his disaster therefore cry out for help? Have I not wept for the one whose life is hard? Was not my soul grieved for the needy? When I expected good, then evil came. Then I waited for the light, then darkness came. I am seething within, cannot relax. Days of affliction confront me. I go about mourning without comfort. I stand up in the assembly and cry out for help. All of us in here know the story of Job and what happened to him concerning God, Satan, and so forth, and all the bad things that he went through in his life, even to losing his very health. And Job was a man who got to a point where you can see in the book of Job where he got put out with God. And of course we know, as you know, he didn't understand why all these things were happening to him. He didn't know what he had done or if he had done anything. He didn't think he had done anything. I don't think there's anything that I've committed that would cause God to cause these things to happen to me and so forth. And he wanted to make some points here to God, speaking, if you will, in front of his friends. And he says here in verse 21, I cry out to God for help, but he does not seem to be listening to me. He doesn't seem to be listening to me. In verse 21 through 23, Job said that God had become cruel to him. And the end result of this can only be death. In verse 24, Job states that isn't it natural for a man to cry out for help in time of need? And that's absolutely true, isn't it? I mean, should I cry out to you? Yes, I should cry out to you because I'm in need, and a man should do that. In verse 25, Job asked God, had God not recognized that he had wept for those who were in need, that he was actually a man who provided for the needy. If you read the book of Job, he cared for widows and orphans and so forth, and the poor and what have you, and he defended the helpless at the gates of the city and so forth. So he was a very proactive man concerning those who were being oppressed. And in verse 26 through 28, evil and darkness and affliction had come upon him, and there was no comfort that he could find. And so he just lays out a little case there in front of his friends on the situation that he's in. A terrible situation. And really, if anybody had cause to complain, it was Job. If anyone had cause to complain. He basically had what we would call the woe is me attitude. He didn't see that these things were fair to him because he didn't feel like he did anything to deserve any of these things. Of course, he hadn't. And it didn't have anything to do with deserving anything. And I guess if we look at it from human wisdom, just looking at it with our eyes and being in Job's shoes, we will probably do the same thing, would we not? I mean, just to be honest, we'd probably do the same thing. But as you go through the book of Job, you understand when you get to Job 38, in that chapter where God begins to speak, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. That basically what God tells him is this. You don't understand what's going on. I understand that. But what you got to do is have faith. And what you got to do is trust me that it's going to turn out all right. is basically, and as you know, he never told Job what happened, as far as we know. It's never recorded in the book of Job. He never did tell Job why these things were happening to him. He just said, just trust me. Just trust me. And when you take that observation and to our observation, to human observation, when you look around in the world that we live in, it seems like control is being lost. Control is being lost. It's always been that way, but we live today, and so that's what we have to deal with. We look around the world today and all the chaos, and it seems like that control is being lost in this world. Control of desires, control concerning committing wickedness, and control of sin and deception and hatred and so forth. And it seems we're losing the capacity of good sense, of taking responsibility for our actions, of recognizing good from evil and standing for what is right. Again, in history it's been that way, but we live in this time where it seems to be more pronounced because of our ability to communicate with one another so quickly. You know, we are blessed to be able to get information on anything in a matter of seconds. You all remember when you had to go to the library? I got to do a research paper. Well, you don't get out your phone. Today you get out your phone, you get out your laptop, your iPad. You go through and you get a few things. It doesn't take you long to find out the information, what you need. But remember back in the day when you had to do a report and you had to go to the library? Had to go through the card catalog. You remember the card catalog? Find a book on the subject, go find the book, get the book, and go through the book to try to find out the information. It took a little longer than it does today to find out that information. But we live in an instant information society, instant communication society, which is a good thing. But with anything that's good, it can be bad also. Because we instantly know what's bad, don't we? We instantly know what's good. We can get information and we instantly know what's bad. We know what's happening across the world in a matter of seconds. Isn't that amazing? In a matter of seconds, we can know what's going on in China, in India, and these other places, whether it's good or whether it's bad. But unfortunately, people pay attention to the bad more than they do the good. And of course, I'm still convinced there's more good in this world, I'm sure, than there is bad. But people seem to focus on those things. It was like the teacher who was teaching the class, and she wrote out the 12 times timetable. She goes, 12 times 1 is 12, 12 times 2 is 24, 12 times 3 is 36. And she goes, 12 times 4 is 56. And she kept going. And she got all the rest of them right. And the class that she was teaching was like making fun of her, because she had missed that one. And the point she was trying to make to the class was, you paid attention to the 1, but you didn't pay attention to the 11 I got right. That's the attitude that you have. You don't say, oh, you got 11 right. You say, you got 1 wrong. And so that's what we fall into sometimes. And so we may ask ourselves questions like, looking around us, are some people really that self-centered and selfish? Yeah, they are. Do some people count the cost of their actions beforehand? Well, no, they don't. Sometimes we don't. Do some people really seek out to do evil to another person? The answer is yes. Yes, they do. Have some of the leaders of the world lost the capacity to rule godly? Well, yes. Yes, they have. We do have godly leaders in the world, but many have lost that capacity. And it is true that one thing that we can learn from history is that we don't learn from history. It's amazing how each generation that comes up thinks they've got the answers to all the problems. Remember when we were teenagers and up in our 20s years old, we thought adults didn't know what they were doing? Or why did they mess up the world the way they did? Y'all don't remember that? Yes, you do. When you're like 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 25 years old, you're like, this older generation messed things up. They don't know how to solve any of the issues that goes on. And guess what? we get up in age and the next generation comes up and tells us that we didn't solve everything as they come down. And each generation has done that. You can go all the way back in history. I don't care where you go. Each new generation tells the older generation they messed things up, and we're here to straighten it out. We were guilty of that. This generation is guilty of that. Our grandparents' generation was guilty of that. And so we don't learn from history as we should. Each generation seems to repeat the same mistakes of generations past. And so we see the cycle repeat itself over and over and over again. And sometimes, like Job, we may look up towards God as a nation or as individuals, and we may ask some questions of God. God, why are you letting this happen? Have you ever asked that, in your mind, or maybe even out loud, looking around the world? God, why do you allow these things to happen? If you haven't, I want the secret, because I know you probably have. God, why are you allowing this war to go on? People die over here. God, why are you allowing this to happen in our nation here or that nation there, and so forth? We've got the questions, right? God, why are you letting these things happen? We may ask, God, don't you see what's going on? It's kind of like Habakkuk, the prophet Habakkuk. Habakkuk was the faithful remnant of Judah. And he looked around the nation of Judah. And he looked at the idols that they were worshiping up on the high places and the worship of the pagan gods. They were worshiping God along with the pagan gods. And his question to God was, why in the world are you letting this happen, God? Look at it. Don't you know what's going on in the nation of Judah? The faithful remnant is trying to remain faithful, and yet we got all this trouble that's going on around there. We may ask God, well, why don't you do something about it? Have you ever asked him that? Am I by myself? God, why don't you do something about it? Why are you letting this evil run rampant here, there, and yonder? And we may ask these questions. But think about this. It may be that God is looking down to us and saying, you brought this on yourselves. Right? You brought this on yourselves. He may be saying, you have rejected me as your God, therefore I reject you as my people. He may say, you have turned your back to me, you have sowed the wind, now reap the whirlwind, as he has in the past. And so can't God come back with statements to us as well, as questions to him? Well, some people might say, well, we're not God, right? We're not God. We're here on this earth. We have a finite life, and the things that are happening around us, I wish God would straighten it out. But you know what he would tell us, the same thing he told Job. Trust me. Have faith. You'll come out okay on the other side. Make sense? But sometimes we can't accept that answer. A lot of people can't accept that answer because there are people hurting in this world. God knows people are hurting in this world. God knows they're suffering. He knows more so than you and I ever will know. And he knows his faithful in this world. He not only cares about his faithful, but he cares about all people. He cares that people are dying in the Ukraine and are dying in the Middle East. He cares that people starve. He cares about all those things. But God may be saying, I've given you this world. Even after the fall, he told Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Use it for your own, so you may live. And in all that, he may say, well, I've given it to you. And I've given you all these blessings. But what you've done is you brought this on yourself. I'm not going to make you obey me. That wouldn't be love. I'm not going to make you follow me. But if you turn to me, maybe we can straighten some things out if you listen to me. He may tell us, follow my statutes, and I shall be your God, and you shall be my people. Ezekiel chapter 11. He may say, as Jesus said, I've often wanted to gather you together like a hen does her chicks, but you were unwilling. Matthew 23 and verse 37. Wasn't he willing to take the Jews under his wings? Why weren't the Jews brought under his wings? Because they didn't want to. Right? He would have been happy to have them under his wings. He may tell us to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. I've got the formula for peace. Matthew 6 verse 33. He may say to ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you. Matthew 7 and verse 7. He may tell us, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Psalm 33 and verse 12. He may tell us that I will give you the peace that surpasses all comprehension. Philippians 4 and verse 7. And he may say from John 3:16, I love you. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. God gave us this world to use. And he expects us to act accordingly towards one another in a way that benefits mankind. That benefits one another. God doesn't want man, if you will, suppressing man. That's man. That's sin. That's man's ego. God doesn't want people at war unless it's necessary, as he did in the past, to suppress some evil that's arisen. But he doesn't wish there was any war or any evil. And he may say, as Paul says in Romans 1 and verse 28, you do not see fit to acknowledge me any longer. So I'm going to give you over to a depraved mind so you can do evil things and fill yourself with all unrighteousness. You know, there's a certain point where you have to let your children fly. Right? You raise your children in your house when they're little, when they're growing up. You basically control the environment and control what they go through and try your best to raise them in the right way. But when they get to be adults, all you can do is just hold out a hand and say, I'll help you when I can, right? That's all you can do. So that's what God does to us. Here's my word. Here's what I wish for you to do. You're adults. I'm here, but you're not making some very good decisions. Just like children, when they get older, they're out of your authority. Sometimes they don't make good decisions. But the answers to all this lie in a couple of things. Number one, the fact that we must have faith and trust in God. That's basically what Job was told. Trust me. Again, that's not easy because we live here. As Paul said in Romans chapter 8 and verse 28. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. All things. Guess what? That's good and bad. That's good and bad. And it doesn't mean it's going to work together for good and make you feel good. It doesn't mean it's going to work for good and make you physically feel good. It's going to work together for good to save a soul. Because that's what's more important. You know, we think about eternity and the little while that's here. You ever thought about this as the practice time for eternity? Right now, we're in practice for eternity. Into that home, if you will, that's coming. And through the practice, we go through the toil, we go through the struggle, we go through the things in this life in order to practice to get to where we need to go. No. It's practice time. And the more we do here, the better we'll be suited for the eternity. Some people think that when we get into heaven, we're going to be some spiritual zombies or something. Brethren, we're not going to be spiritual zombies with minds that are just spaced out singing praises to God all the time. It's not how it's going to work. If you want to be in the presence of God and His people today, you'll want to be in the presence of God and His people in the eternity. Does that make sense? God isn't going to take you out. You're going to be yourself. Yes, the temptations are going to be gone, but you're still going to be you. If you don't want to be with the people of God here, what about eternity? You're going to be surrounded by them. Make sense? Faith and trust in God. Work together for good towards eternity. We need to turn to God for the answers. Turn to God for the answers, not necessarily ourselves. He's got the answers. As Paul said in Romans 8 and verse 31, if God be for us, who can be against us? Right? We must have a deep, abiding faith in God that He will answer our plea. And guess what? Sometimes the answer is no. I don't know, but I would guess that Job prayed a lot to God to be healed. What do you think? Yeah. Just a guess. But I would guess that at least Job indicates that he was in this state for months. That in those months that he was in this very state, there's no telling how many times he prayed for God to heal him. What do you think? God answers every prayer in the way He wants to answer it. Because Jesus put the caveat on it in the garden. And the caveat is this: Thy will be done. Father, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me. But not my will, but thine be done. Jesus showed us what the caveat is. Plain and simple. God's will. And guess what? What did God tell His own Son? No. If He told His own Son no, would He tell us no? Absolutely. So let's not get our back up when He says no. Nope. You've got to bear this cup in order to do what needs to be done. And sometimes when God says no, we've got a cup to bear because God wants us to do what He needs done. Is it easy? No. Jesus said in Mark chapter 11 verses 22 and 23. He says, have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain be taken up and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says is going to happen, it will be granted to him. Certainly will. It will be granted to him in the way that God wants to grant it. God will move the mountain. We must be a people who approach God with a heart of trust and not doubt. Are these things easy? No. A heart of trust. Even James tells us in James 1 verses 6 and 7 that he must ask in faith without any of doubting. For the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For that man ought to expect that he will receive anything from the Lord. That's doubting God, is what that is. It's doubting God. If we approach prayer doubting God, might as well not even bend the knee, is what James says. Can we doubt ourselves? Sure we can. Can we doubt our abilities? Yeah. Doubting the Creator is a different matter. And as we've been talking about, we've got to have the attitude of thy will be done. As Jesus did in the garden in Luke 22 and 41. Got a little ahead of myself on that one. But nonetheless, thy will be done. And that's basically what Job said after he heard God's explanation. He basically said, if you read the last chapter, he said, well, I'm going to keep my mouth shut and I'm going to trust you. Is that hard to do sometimes? Yeah, it is. But Job did it. There are many problems in our lives and in this world, but we have to understand that God is bigger than any problems that we might have. This world is too big for you and me to solve all the problems. If we got 12 people around a table and had all the power in the world to solve the problems of the world, guess what would happen? We'd cause more problems than we would solve. Wouldn't we? We would. We'll set out that. We'll put out a fire over here and 5 more will spring up right over there. Oh, we'll solve this issue over here, but wait a minute, if we solve this issue, these 2 places will lose what they have. Does that make sense? Well, if I was in charge, I would really straighten things out. No, we wouldn't. No, we wouldn't. The world's too big. The problem's too complex. There's too many different things going on that would affect it. Millions of things that God is aware of. And He can work it out. He can work it out. So, does God control our world? Yes, He does. Is our attitude, thy will be done? It should be. And when we look around the world, we need to have the attitude of Job. Lord, I can't see all ends, but I trust you. I know that you're working things out. I know that you're working things out. Is there anyone here tonight who needs help? Or online that needs help, needs prayers or whatever it may be? Let that be made known as we stand and sing this song.